breath and the breathing process. Enjoying the breath, enjoying the breathing process. Sit with your back as straight as you can without it being uncomfortable, and maybe have your hands in your lap. Maybe there's a slight smile on your face like the Mona Lisa. Mouth should be closed. Tongue relaxed in the palate. Eyes may be closed or slightly open. Just come back to the inhalation, the exhalation. Notice how one breath leads into the next breath. More like a wave in an ocean, less like a line. Thich Nhat says that the water is not less than the wave is not less than water. Each breath implies the next breath, and no breath is less than the next breath. Where does the breath begin and the next breath end and the next breath begin? As thoughts come up, come back to the breathing process. Point of contact in the nose. When the cool air comes in the nose, warm air goes out the nose. This is the practice. Vipassana meditation or Zazen meditation, a lot of it is watching the breath. If anything I say can't be used by everybody, if it's not truth for everybody, all human beings, then it's worthless. Turn it off, erase this. It should be applicable to everybody. I know there's a lot of dogs and cats probably listening out there. Woof, meow. This may not apply to you. This primarily applies to human beings, but it should apply to all human beings. That's nothing I'm saying here. Everything should be able to be experienced in the present moment. Watching the breath and the breathing process, and coming back to the point of contact in the nose, where the cool air comes in the nose and the warm air goes out the nose. This allows very often us to become aware of thoughts. And when one is aware of thoughts, then one comes back to the breath and the breathing process. The nature of the mind is to wander, and this helps bring the mind back. This is a mala, I'll tell you about it after I read you a quote from Lama Thubten Zopa Rinpoche, who I had the occasion to learn with in Kopan in Kathmandu. This from Transforming Problems. All your happiness and suffering are not received externally from others, but come from yourself. All your happiness and suffering are created by your own mind. The whole problem of suffering depends entirely on your own mind. I wondered about that. All of our happiness and suffering does not come from external sources. It comes from within. It seems initially odd because one would think that I saw a show, a person lived on a palace in the Rajasthan area, a prince. I saw his palace in Rajasthan. He is beautiful and palatial, and it's on water and an ocean and a lake. It's beautiful. But I've never seen anybody live in such luxury. I mean, I'm sure there are other people. I also saw people when I was in Bodh Gaya, little children that were so hungry and so dirty and so poor. I bought them bananas, and they ripped bananas out of my hands. I remember their nails cut into my fingers. They were so desperate to get the bananas to eat. One would think that those children have less of a shot at happiness than does the prince on the palace. One would think that the prince on the palace has less of a chance of suffering than do those children in Bodh Gaya. But that's my initial reaction. But he's not saying that. He's saying something else. He's saying that all happiness and all suffering come from our own mind. That means that every human being has all their happiness and all their suffering within them now. It's up to them, not anything outside. That's, to me, revolutionary. He says, but you have to understand why he says this. The purpose of having this precious human body this time is not for yourself, but to eliminate the suffering of all sentient beings. So it's to obtain other people's happiness, not your own. I mean, it's nice if it's the self-cherishing thought about I that creates suffering, you know. So now he talks about the I. When you look at the I, sometimes there appears that the I has a nature existing from its own side. It appears that you impute the I on the aggregate. So I say I am sitting, I am meditating. There's not any I sitting. There's not any I meditating. There's just the aggregate sitting. If there is no thought which labels the I in I am sitting, then there is no I existing. I'll say that again. He says it. If there is no thought which labels the I as in I am sitting, there is no I. Done. So that's intense. So there's no separate self. The I is dependent on the aggregates, and we'll talk about what the aggregates are in a moment. But just another word for aggregates that is used elsewhere is phenomena. The phenomena of existence, the phenomena of the senses, is all that makes up our reality. There is no I unless the I imputes I am sitting. So what is there in the world? I mean, I remember asking him, if there's no I, then why are we all here? Why are we all sitting here, Lama Zopa, and doing all this if there is no I? And he says, the mind is like a cloth, and you have to clean the cloth. The mind is like a cloth, a white cloth, and you have to clean the cloth. I want to discuss a little bit about these aggregates that come into play. So I want to read you something from the Satipatthana Sutta, and specifically how the Buddha describes the aggregate. So I am sitting. So think about the I coming into existence. This is from the Satipatthana Sutta. The I knows sights and understand the fetter that arises dependent on both the I and the sight. The ear knows sounds and understands the fetter that arises dependent upon both. I am hearing. The nose knows smells and understands the fetter that arises dependent upon both. I am smelling. The tongue knows tastes and understands the fetter that arises dependent upon both. I am tasting. The body knows touch and understands the fetter that arises dependent upon both. I am touching. The mind knows mental formations, and this is interesting, and understands the fetter that arises dependent upon both. I am thinking. Okay, so all there is the sight and the sound. There is the sense object touching the object. In the case of bodily, the sense of touch, you have the hand touching the object. There's touching. There's the awareness of that touching. There's the object, the subject, the object, the awareness of that. But it's a fetter that arises because there's only this. In the present moment, there's only this. But afterwards, there's I am holding the incense. I impute an I upon this, the aggregates. But the aggregates are dependent. Without the sense and the object touching, there is no me touching it. Okay, listen to this. Okay, this is again the Buddha. This is from the Dvaya Sutta. So listen. There's the I informs, there arises I consciousness. Okay? The ear and sounds, there arises ear consciousness. The nose and aroma, and there arises nose consciousness. The tongue and the flavors, there arises tongue consciousness. The body and tactile sensations, and there arise body consciousness. The intellect and ideas, and there arises intellect consciousness. 6 senses. Treat the mind as a sense. Thinking as another sense, like touching. Okay, so 6 senses. So in this is easy, but for thought it's the thought and the subject, the brain, the thought, thinking, the thinker and the thought and thinking, right? Or more specifically, mind or intellect, the objects of mind, thoughts, and mind consciousness. Think of it like this: eyes and form, and eye consciousness or seeing; ears and sound, and ear consciousness, hearing; nose and smell, and nose consciousness or smelling; tongue and taste, or taste consciousness, tasting; body and touch, tactile sensations, and body consciousness, touching; mind and objects of mind, or intellect and thoughts, and mind consciousness, perceiving. That's all there is. It's these things together. So listen to this, and I'm coming to the end of this, but again, from the Buddha's Dvaya Sutta. Owing to the eye and forms, you get eye consciousness. But listen to this: the eye is impermanent and changing. Forms are impermanent and changing. Thus, the dyad is fleeting and transient. Boom. The eye is changing. The form is changing. So the eye consciousness is changing. They're all interdependent. Without the I thinking, there's no I doing the thinking. I am sitting, I generate the thought, I am thinking, and now there's an I. But it's only generated once I impute it on it. The I is changing. We know we die. We know it's physically decaying. We know the object of the I is physically decaying. We know it's all transient. So that only comes into being when the I consciousness, seeing, only comes into condition when we're seeing these objects which are themselves transient. The transience is built on transience. The I is impermanent, forms are impermanent, thus the dyad is fleeting and transient, impermanent and changing. That causes the condition that is I consciousness. That is also impermanent and changing. So how could I consciousness, having arisen dependent on impermanent conditions, become permanent? Again, how could I consciousness, having arisen dependent on impermanent conditions, become permanent? This is called I consciousness, but it's fleeting. That's like nose consciousness. That's like taste consciousness or tasting. That's like touching or body consciousness. That's like perceiving, mind consciousness. It's fleeting. The coming together, the meeting, the convergence of these phenomena is intellect contact. But that's not dependent on anything either. So we have to thank here Thanissaro Bhikkhu. It's his translations on the Buddha and Dvaya Sutta, a pair, from where these translations come from. And we didn't have access to this stuff before. I mean, and it's revolutionary because what happens in the mind? Why do we have the illusion of a separate self? The first set of opposites. Our mind exists in opposites. Our mind sees sense and object. It creates an opposite of subject and object, of self and other. So we have the illusion that we're separate. We have the illusion that the self of a separate self is not. The self is interdependent on all things around us. Interdependent. But we create an illusion between the self and the object because that gives the self substance. I say, I am sitting. There's just the aggregates, the 18 aggregates coming together, if you will, or the 6 dyads of the 5 sense objects, the 5 sense experiences, and the 6th sense experience of intellect consciousness on the same level as the other 5 senses. Think of it in that way. But those dyads come into existence only on the basis of impermanence. The self, the I consciousness that's triggered by this contact of the sight, or the touching that's triggered by the hand touching this, these are all impermanent. They're all based on the same level of impermanence. So But we create the illusion of a separate self. So we have self and other. That's the first illusion we've created. The self, I think, is independent. It's not. I need air. We need to breathe. We're not very independent. I'm sweating. I need water. How long can I go here without water? Not long. We're not independent creatures, but we think if I create an independent self, I'm separate from those things around me. That's the first kind of opposite that we create, which doesn't help anything, and it's an illusion. Okay? Then we create opposites like us and them. Okay? Then we group together based on common features, and we say we're an us and they're a them. Again, all illusions. We're just humanity. We all want happiness. We all don't want suffering. Nobody wants to just be in pain. Everybody wants happiness. We're humans. That's all it is. Different bags of skin and whatnot. Different languages, different cultures, yes, but we're just humanity. But we create illusions, us and them. These are not always very helpful to humanity. We create separations between the past and the future. We create concepts. The future is a fairy tale. It's just a story we tell ourselves in the present moment. But think of it like this. The present moment just is each breath. As you breathe in and you watch the cool air come in the nose, warm air go out the nose. One breath rises, the other breath falls, leading to the next breath. The next inhalation, each inhalation implies the exhalation, which implies the inhalation. The present, so too, implies the future, which implies the present. There is no independent future that exists without the present moment. There is no independent past that exists without the present moment. And this doesn't mean the past didn't happen. It did. The events transpired. But it is dependent upon us now remembering those events. People say, think about this, if a tree didn't fall in if a tree fell in the forest and nobody was there to hear it, did it make a sound? It's a conundrum that perplexes people, and people want to jump and say, yes, it makes a sound, no one's there to hear it, but they skirt the issue because sound is dependent upon the interrelationship of one thing happening and me hearing it. So it's conceptually, this idea breaks through, but people don't get it. Which came first, the chicken and the egg? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? People know it's an intellectual conundrum and we set it aside, but the point is that these opposites that we create, a linear time frame, don't work. It's based in an illusion. We want a calendar, it makes it simple for us, we have times in the day, we all relate to that, but it's all based in interrelationships, and it implies an independent existence that it doesn't have. But we create immense suffering because of the future we want. We create immense suffering for ourselves when we tell ourselves, and we've done this to each other. I've done it to myself, maybe you've done it to yourself. We have plans in the future that we want to succeed, we want to do, and if we don't meet these things, we're going to be upset with things. And we'll take it out on ourselves, we'll take it out on others. You know, it happens all the time. And the suffering comes from this self-cherishing thought, I am suffering, right? The suffering is a condition of life because it's always transient. Life is transient. We want the permanent, so we create opposites which give us definition. Right and wrong, good and bad, up and down. I mean, it's not that there's not up and down, but everything is relative. It's not that there's not a right and wrong, everything is relative though, like that. Then people will want to say, well, where are the absolute truth? People will say this is emptiness. If you're saying the past doesn't have independent reality, then you're saying everything is meaningless, everything is nihilism, everything means nothing, everything is fatalism. These are all misconceptions, and here's why. Those things are all true, but they're also not true. And here's why. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is only form. This is the major teaching. These are opposites we create. We create form and emptiness. These are opposites, but think of these opposites. All form is made up of emptiness. We're all going to die. Everything will ultimately decay. I tell myself I'll never die. I theoretically know I'll die, but I can't process that. Every day I wake up, every second of my life, I'm telling myself I'll live forever. This will never end. Every second I tell myself that, right? When I'm alive. I don't think, oh, I'll be dead. How can I conceptualize? I know I'm going to be dead, but I can't integrate that. Because the thoughts that says I am sitting gives me substance. It gives me permanence. That thought won't allow me to accept my death. It doesn't mean I won't die. It means that it's an illusion that I'm of permanence that I create upon myself. And when I impute the I on the aggregates, that's what Lama Thubten Zopa Rinpoche is saying. An illusion that I'm creating, it's just these aggregates that we've discussed. It's not nihilism. It's not fatalism. Form is emptiness. All this form is emptiness. It will all decay. Everything will decay. But emptiness is only form. All we have is form. All we have is law. All we have is code. All we have is how we live our life. All we have is the present moment. People say it's amoralism. You say they're good and wrong, right and bad, right and good and bad, and right and wrong, good and evil. They're all concepts. Yes, they're all concepts. We create concepts on a number line, on a balance point. We want to say 0 is the present moment, plus is the future, negative is the past, and we exist in a linear fashion because this allows us, and we'll have a calendar, and we'll do all this, and we'll plan the future at exact times, and we'll have dates. It's fine, but everything only exists now. So we know there's a fundamental lack of reality in the past and the future. We know the future is made out of whole cloth. It's simply a fairy tale we tell ourselves. We can plan for it, but every present moment has the future. But it gives us an illusion of separate self. And this, why is this harmful? Because we not only do we start, it's the seed of this creation of opposites, and it's a cause of hatred among people. It's the cause of suffering among our mind. We create a division between what is and what should be, in the words of Krishnamurti, between what is now and what should be, or what should have been. It always distracts us from the now. And this podcast, this discussion, is meant to connect to the now and to cut through all the illusions. Watch the point of contact in the nose. The cool air comes in the nose. Warm air goes out the nose. We enjoy the breath and the breathing process. And as thoughts come and go, we let them come. We let them go. We're aware that we're thinking. Just come back to the breath. Breathing process. Remember, in Hebrew, the word ruach and revach, space, and breath, and emptiness, and air, very often are just the same word in Kabbalah. Same word in Hebrew sometimes. Breath and emptiness. But remember, all we have is the present moment. All we have is form. This world of action. All we have is the ability to take care of each other, take care of ourselves, take care of each other, try to ease the suffering of all those around us. Namaste.